also want to thank the U.S. Army War College for coming out tonight. So we are welcoming all of our senior officers from U.S. Army War College. They're going to be doing a panel discussion tonight on security challenges at home and abroad. We're excited to say this is the 18th consecutive year at the library that we have hosted a panel discussion with the officers from the U.S. Army War College. This presentation is part of the Eisenhower Series college program with the U.S. Army War College. I'm not going to say, we have a bunch of great programs coming up. I'm not going to go through that since we're a little bit late, so please make sure you look to the PTPL events calendar to see all the wonderful programming that the library has to offer. They're all listed right there. You can register for those events there. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Christopher, who is a career Foreign Service officer with the United States Department of the State. And he is going to be our moderator for this discussion this evening. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Can you all hear me? I have a bit of a scratchy throat tonight, so if you can't, just let me know and I'll try to project more. My name is Chris Anthony. I'm a State Department Foreign Service officer, but I am assigned to the faculty of the U.S. Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, through an interagency agreement. And I am really pleased to see you all here tonight. The parking lot is full. This is an awesome library, so we are part of a good event tonight. Thank you very much for having us. I want to say a few words about the War College itself, a few words about the Eisenhower Series program, and then turn it over to our panelists, who will each speak for a few minutes, and then we'll have an open discussion, and we welcome your questions and comments. So the U.S. Army War College in Carlisle represents for our students who are typically at the lieutenant colonel level or equivalent from a multiple number of services, and from, we have international partners as well. This represents the highest level of professional military education, whereby by the time officers are selected through a very selective process to enter the War College for this 10-month-long program of education, they are near the pinnacles of their careers. And in order to progress to general officer or flag rank level, it's almost essential to have that War College degree behind you. Many of our students have multiple degrees because of the military's promotion of education through the GI Bill, and that's true of our panelists here tonight. So what we try to do at the War College is to take our leaders, who will, some of them go on to be making policy decisions, and others who will be in the room and advising those same people. We want to broaden their horizons to the strategic level. So through their careers, they've typically already mastered tactics and operational approaches. Now we want to get them to understand the way the government functions, the role of interagency cooperation. We talk about the theory of war and what it means to foresee the end of a war, how you analyze what the rest of the world looks like from a strategic perspective, the international system. We try to induce a sense of history, which we call historical mindedness, and we try to induce something called strategic empathy, that is, learning to understand the other guy, so to speak, whether it be an adversary or an ally, understand where they are coming from, how they got to be in the position that we now find them. So that's the concept of the War College. And the Eisenhower program in particular got its roots in the Vietnam era, and in particular with the tragic incident at Kent State University in 1970 when 4 people were killed, leading to more protests. And Dickinson College in Carlisle did have students who were upset and came to the War College. Unfortunately, that turned into a dialogue. It was the beginning of the recognition that of something we wanted to do more broadly. And ever since then, we have been coming to the Pittsburgh area in particular, but also across the country, bringing our students to talk to audiences like yourself. Earlier this morning, we talked to a high school audience Often we go to universities, we sometimes go to foreign affairs clubs and organizations. But the idea is partly to expose our officers to audiences who may not necessarily be deeply familiar with the military and who have questions and observations for our military officers, but also for them to share their views on current topics with you all. So with that, I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, and we can just start with Chris and move on over to the left, and then after the introductions, each of them will give their short presentations, and then we'll do the discussion.
She said I should go first. Good evening. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Christina Taylor. I'm in the Idaho National Guard. So one of the things you'll hear tonight is we all come from different components of the Army, as well, Army. But in the National Guard, I've had a chance to do a lot of things in Idaho at smaller unit level, and I've led up to a battalion of about 400 people as well. And I've been on some specialized teams, but I've also been in some, combat service support missions, and I've deployed. I have my roots in Idaho. I graduated from there, University of Idaho, and I got my bachelor's in elementary education. I know you're going to ask how that got to the Army, so I'll just tell you I went through ROTC, and I got my commission in 2002. I did go to further my education, got a master's from Central Michigan in leadership. And then coming to the Army War College, I get the opportunity to have this 10-month experience, and it will give us a master's in strategic studies as well. So like Chris said, there's a lot of education background before we get to this level, and pass the mic on.
Hello, good evening. I'm Colonel Charlotte Yarden. I've been in the Army about 25 years. I started off as an air defense artillery officer, working with the Patriot missile systems, and then later transferred within my career to human resources fields. I've done a little bit of the combat arms stuff, and then I've done a lot of administration the last half of my career. My bachelor's degree is from the College of William and Mary in Virginia. I have a master's in management and leadership from Western University. I've served in a variety of assignments across my career. I have commanded a battalion of about 650 people or so in that battalion. My most recent assignment was with the Defense Advisory Committee on Women in the Services in Minnesota, Dackwitz. They've been around a long time, about 70 years, advising the Secretary of Defense on women's policy. That was my assignment prior to coming to the War College. I look forward to talking to you all this evening. I'll pass it off to my colleagues.
Good evening. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Lewis. I'm actually a JAG officer, a resident reserve officer. And also on my civilian side, I'm a federal prosecutor. So I'm in the U.S. Department of Justice. So I'm a reserve component here. Active duty, National Guard, and I'll be the I'll be the combo 3, which is the reserve. I have a couple of degrees. Just grab them off real quick. I have a BFA from Ford's National University in political theory, political science. I have a BFA from Georgia School, that's what I knows. Master's of Strategic Intelligence from the National Intelligence College. And then I have a law degree from Temple University and also Yale College. I really worked a lot overseas, most of it global. I worked primarily in South America, Central America. I worked for the Department of Justice, and for the Department of Defense, working in various views. I had a chance to command, and for this my last unit was in Township, Germany. I just finished that assignment before the end of the
Last but not least, hi, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Will Phillips. As you heard earlier, we've got a pretty decent, diverse group of component soldiers from the United States Army. We've got Chris, who's a Compo 2, two soldiers from the Idaho National Guard. We've got Jordan, who's a Compo 1 from active duty. My buddy Lewis, who is Compo 3, and I am also Compo 2. I currently serve with the Arkansas National Guard, but I've spent a lot of time in Georgia. I'm a 32-year veteran. I started out as an enlisted soldier, E1, to work my way to E6. 12 after spending 12 years as an enlisted soldier, I decided to come over to the dark side and become an officer. I've got my bachelor's degree is a liberal arts degree with a focus in psychology, which I got from the University of Excelsior University in Albany, New York. I have my master's degree from University of Charleston, West Virginia, which is also a master's degree in strategy as a practice, and then I'll be getting another master's degree through the Army War College. Again, we've got a pretty diverse group here. We look forward to hearing your questions. We're going to also give you a short pitch on what we're going to be talking about, but we really would love to hear the questions that you have. And I'm sure that Chris is going to go over a couple of things before we start.
I do just have a couple more things I would like to mention before I, yes ma'am? Well, that was one of my questions. Can those of you who are upstairs hear us properly? You can? So let's be sure to speak close to the microphone and project. It seems so. Thank you for mentioning that. A second point that I wanted to make is that all of our speakers will be giving short versions of speeches that they've been working on topics they've selected to deliver to all of our events. So each one of them has a couple of different topics, and they won't be giving the full versions of their speeches, but they will be giving you a short version of that, and then that sets the stage. Your questions can address anything they've talked about or anything else that's on your mind. A third thing I want to mention is that all of our speakers are speaking on their own behalf. We are not here officially, or that is what we say is not necessarily the perspective of the U.S. Army War College or of the U.S. government. So we please just want you to have that disclaimer. These are our personal views that we're sharing.
We're eager to hear what they say. We're honored to have them here. So I hope we can hear them.
There's your cue, folks. Speak up.
Okay, I'm gonna try this. I've had a sore throat. Is that better? You're gonna be my thumbs up or down, right? You'll be my thumbs up or down. So we write 2 speeches in this program that we do, and so we're just gonna offer what we wrote our speeches about. We're not gonna give you the long versions, but just kind of a food for thought and a starter. So the two speech topics that I actually wrote on, the first one was, do we still need the National Guard? And so I asked that question, to myself. I asked it to some of my peers. I also put it into artificial intelligence to see what the computer would tell me. So good thing is, we all agree we still need the National Guard. So the reason behind that is due to the dual nature that they can serve both state and federal capacities. So if you've ever experienced, a snowstorm or a flood or fire, and they say, call in the Guard, those are the governor's assets that they can use in a state active duty capacity. That's a very unique capacity. Unfortunately, my fellow partners here, they don't get to exercise that authority. That is a unique capacity for a homeland defense purpose specific to every state. So I think I looked, Pennsylvania National Guard has about 5,600. Will's checking me over there. But every state has a different force structure. So in Idaho, we have an Army Brigade and an Air Force Wing for both National Guard. It provides a huge amount of service if the citizens of that state need that capability. Sometimes it's for logistic purposes, sometimes it's transportation, building sandbags. That's one of the capacities that the Guard can do that's unique to our other components. The second research topic that I looked at was retention. Does anybody here remember Be All You Can Be? Show of hands, couple nods. Okay, that was about 20 years ago. So that's about when I joined. Let's not count ages here, but it's strange because it went away. Slogans come and go, right? But when I joined, I struggled with how long I should stay in. And I had to figure out, is this for me? It's not what I planned, but it's where I'm at. So I have a story that I can share with you. I'll make it real short. But somebody handed me a note one time. And it was a little extra touch that said, I am valued. They actually think I'm doing a good job, and I might have a potential here. So there's a retention strategy that I could offer you that talks about just little efforts, checking in with your people. How are you doing? How's your family? How do you like the job? What other training would you like? But just engaging on that personal level so that you don't always have to find new recruits. Sometimes you have that good talent, that experience, that knowledge but they just need to know that they're worthy to the organization that you want to keep them. So that's just food for thought on my two topics, but we will answer anything about anything, or we'll try.
All right, good evening again. My two topics that I worked on this year, the first one, I asked myself the question, having most recently come from the Defense Advisory Committee on Women in the Services, or DACWIS, what does it look like to fight like a girl in today's day and age? Right? That was what I started to look at. And as I began to look into that and dig into that, I kind of thought back to, well, if somebody says you fight like a girl, it's something of an insult. You know? So I rephrased the question, what does it look like to fight like a woman in this modern age? And I would hope that today, when you hear that phrase, what you're thinking of is something more like Captain Marvel, or Rey from Star Wars, or the modern warriors that are out there on the slopes of Afghanistan with the special forces wearing their Kevlar body armor, or even a combat pilot flying missions over Syria and Iraq, because that's what women are doing these days. And then one of the other things that has happened across my military career is that all jobs have been open to women in the military. So there are no longer any restrictions on the jobs that women can have in the military. We've had women graduate from Ranger School. We've had women compete and complete the Special Forces course with women in Special Forces. We have women who are combat pilots with women who fly F-16s, the whole 9 yards. So women have come a long way. Certainly over the 70 years that DACWIS has been working, but even within my own 25-year career, women have really expanded the jobs that they can participate in. And having worked with DACWIS, though, one of the things that is apparent is that there's still work to be done. So there's still issues with women in the service and how many of them ascend to higher ranks and the issues they encounter as they serve. As we can talk about some of those if you want. But this change reflects a couple of very important things. One is that the science is showing more and more that diverse teams perform better than homogeneous ones, and that women have unique contributions that make their teams more effective. And so that's kind of the topic that I looked at, and we can talk about some of those things. And then the second topic I have was examining what it means to bounce forward from failure. So when you experience a really significant failure, do you really just want to bounce back? Or is it that you want to recover so well that you actually bounce forward? What you learn actually takes you to a different level. And I learned that experience through an incident that I was part of in Iraq during my deployment there, where I was a Patriot missile officer. We shot down Scud missiles one day, and we accidentally shot down a Navy F-18 fighter jet the next day. And so as you can imagine, that was quite an experience. And we learned a great deal from it, of course. And I'm happy to share that story with you in more detail if you're interested as the evening goes on. So lots of lessons learned that I can pass on and pass it out to my colleagues.
Can you hear me? Perfect. So I'll try not to hurt you in my head. If I do, I'll take the mic with me because one of my topics was fentanyl. And I think it's a very important topic as we look at the pandemic that we have right now. If you look back last year, we've lost over 100,000 lives in the fentanyl crisis. And I bet you if we were to ask you all in this room, how many have been impacted or know someone that has an addiction or has been overdosed or has some sort of impact by the fentanyl crisis, I'm sure about 50% of you raise your hand. I'm not going to do that. And that's how important it is. And my argument is that affects our national security. I wrote about looking at the United States policy since beginning in the war on drugs back in the Nixon administration, where it was declared that the United States was going to combat or use the sort of tide of the war on drugs. Going forward, in basically each decade, have we changed to adapt to the growing problems of drug trade? Ultimately, what my argument is that if we look at the policies that we've had over the years, we've really concentrated on trying to have some action south of the border. Meaning, if you look at, we'll talk about it a little bit later also, Colombia in the 1980s, 1990s, we have with the Colombia, then we have the Merida Initiative with Central American countries and Mexico, and then following that we have the Bicentennial Framework, which is the last one. All those, except for the Bicentennial Framework, look at the outside problem, but we're not really addressing the problem within. Right? So if you go overseas, a lot of the partners will say, look, we're trying to do everything that we can, but what about the drug problem? What about the demand that is coming from the country? What are we doing about that? So I sort of analyzed those programs to see how they changed, and I think now with the Bicentennial Program, it's starting to look at the addiction problem, right? The mental health issues that we need to combat to be able to have a complete approach to solving the problem of drug trade. So it's not just a drug war, it's also a lot of part of it is the part inside of our country. What can we do? And my second topic is, I'm sure you all heard about this, but International Criminal Court, not the ICJ, that is just on the news, that's the International Court of Justice, but the International Criminal Court. And that is an independent court that holds those who violate war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, to hold them accountable. My argument is that most of all our closest partners, France, England, most of all Western Europe, are part of that organization, but the United States is not. And we should be joining it because by not joining it, it's hurting our credibility. We are a country of laws, with a rule of law. We always advocate that. If you look at our national security strategy for 2023, it mentions numerous times, rules-based order. You hear about that. By joining these organizations, we also are able to implement and change those laws and how the rest of the world kind of fall in line with the way the world should be. And those are my two topics. I'd be happy to take any questions about that. Sure.
So throughout my 32 years in the service, I've had the opportunity to serve in all three components of the United States Army, both Compo 1, Compo 2, and Compo 3. And it's been great. I've met some people who have had a major impact on my life, and it's directly impacted not only my life, but the lives of my children and my grandchildren. So I decided to answer the question that Chris posed earlier, which is not do we need the Guard, but the National Guard, but why we need the National Guard. So I wanted to get after the true guardians of the homeland, the National Guard, and our relevancy so that you can advocate for your neighbors. We live in every county, in every state, all 54 states and territories in the United States. We're the ones that respond when there's a flood, a snowstorm, power outage, hurricane, flooding. Good God, I've been in New Orleans more times than I'd actually care to discuss to handle flooding. But we're the folks that come. But here's the thing is, there are a lot of complex threats facing the National Guard. Decreased funding, increased training requirements, a whole myriad of things that we can talk about a little bit later on, but we need you to advocate for us so that we can stay relevant to provide the services that we provide. And we've got plenty of stories in between the three of us that we can tell you about how that's impacted our lives. But it's been a major impact on my life, even though I've been in all three components. The National Guard, if I'd known about it first, I would have joined the first one. How many people here like politicians? Did things. Oh, we got one. Okay, that's unusual. All right. You are a Christian woman. Thank you. I didn't particularly have a high opinion of politicians either. However, I had an opportunity to serve as a Congressional Affairs Contact Officer, which meant my job was to liaise with both our local, state, and elected officials to work on advocating for our organizations. And what I get a chance to see was how legislative action plays into the readiness of our armed forces. So my paper was exploring how legislative alchemy, I'm using that term as a draw, actually works to increase the readiness of our forces. And I'll give you a quick anecdote, which was, I worked on a program to get what's called a Foreign Military Sales Program stationed in my state, in Arkansas. That resulted in almost $1 billion worth of economic impact to my state. And that's $1 billion with an E. having a chance to work through that legislation, not just working with our elected officials, but working with our chambers of commerce, working with business leaders, working with communities to see if this was something they actually wanted, was really gratifying. And when that contract was awarded to my state, I could look back and say, I was a part of that. But again, it takes advocacy, it takes you, the citizens of the United States, to make sure that our legislators know what you want and what's needed for your specific communities. So I look forward to talking to you about that. And with that, we'll go ahead and start with the question and answer period.
Yeah, I just want to say, I realize we're competing with the ventilation system, which is why we really have to project to cut through that. So thank you all for doing that. I also just wanted to ask a quick question. How many of you all have served in the military or have somebody in your family who has? That's a pretty good record. Appreciate that. That helps us also, though, in some of what we say to have a sense of how familiar you are with those. That said, we open the floor.
Okay, so combo one. All right, so each one of the components in the military are called, I just said it, components. The Army is made up of 3 primary components. Active duty, combo 1. That's Sean. Combo 2 is National Guard. That's myself and Chris. Combo 3 is Lewis. Now, that's in no way ranking them. It's just how
That's
we
your reserve.
It's not ranking them, it's just a number we use so that we can align forces. Now, I will tell you that we have to do a strategic research project for our organization, and I postulate to you that our forces, our senior leaders have done a poor job about using all 3 components. And that's what I write in my paper. My speech has nothing to do with that, but I'm researching and trying to postulate that we need to look at the total force. We, as officers, look at the total force. But I really don't think our senior leaders, when they're talking about force management, we look at the total force and how we can be leveraged to better help our citizens.
Ask for us to advocate with our elected, our elected officials. Our elected officials, do you have any kind of guideline? Most of us don't know what we have here in Pennsylvania. Do you have any guidelines as to what we should be saying to our elected officials to advocate for?
Okay, so first of all, in order for you to know who your elected officials are, there's several websites who you can tell you.
We know who they are.
Okay.
We need some knowledge of what we have, so we know what you need from us.
No problem. So every state normally has either an enlisted association or an officer association. So for me, it's the National Guard Association of Arkansas. I'm not sure, Chris, did you find out who it was from Pennsylvania? Well, Pennsylvania has an enlisted and an officer association. They are able to lobby because they represent the guardsmen who live in your state. And they have specific legislative objectives that are based on your community's needs. So if you'll just type in National Guard Association of Pennsylvania, you'll get a hyperlink, and they'll be glad to tell you exactly who you need to talk to and what you need to be talking about.
I've been thinking about this today, as security challenges, and if you can't answer this, that's fine. You're not experts on it. But specifically, I think I want to ask Lieutenant Colonel Chris. Yeah. Much like much of Pennsylvania, would you consider Idaho a rural state? Rural, mostly rural.
Oh, let me tell you about rural.
Yeah.
We have one stoplight in the entire county where I was born, so yes, we are very rural.
Yeah, so much of Pennsylvania is like that too, so I'm not trying to point down at it all, but I'm just wondering, in the last 10 years or so, especially in rural communities, have you seen an uptick in militias?
Oh, that's a great Idaho question. Yes. Yeah,
And do you guys?
Idaho's a great example of that as
Do you
well.
guys track that? Or is
Yeah,
it-
so I'm gonna take your second part, do we track that? I'm gonna take that one first. This is a little bit of a disclaimer we have to do. From the military perspective, whether that's Army, Navy, Air Force, we cannot collect information on U.S. citizens. That is strictly an FBI process that we have to fine line stay out of. That's for good reason though, right? We don't want a National Guard uprising against, that's not our job. So we don't collect information. However, we work with a lot of the agencies if they need assistance. And I'll give you an example, and then I'll get to Idaho. If you have a biological or chemical hazmat type problem, there are specialty teams in the National Guard in every state. There's one here in Pennsylvania. They're called a Weapons of Mass Destruction Civil Support Team. They work with your local, county, every level of state, with the hazmat teams, with the fire, police. So there are certain instances where we might be responding in assistance of those civil authorities for an incident in the state, but we're not collecting on them per se. So let's get to Idaho. Ever heard of Aryan Nations? They unfortunately have a home base in Idaho, northern Idaho. I was actually in high school when they dropped Easter eggs with little messages on them. And I said, hey Mom, we got this. It fell out of the sky. What does this say? What does it mean? And it was propaganda. So we are aware of them. We know communities such up north where that compound is. You don't wear your uniform at the gas station. You have certain things that you're cautious of, but we're not tracking them. We have had instances where members of the military, I'm sure you've seen on the news too, if they have extremist views that are not conducive to their professional service, we have to address that. So in Idaho, I'm aware, I had Easter egg dropped on my house, and I'm just very cautious. I had a unit up there, and I was just as, I walked into the building, beware of who's around you, lighted areas, park in a good spot, have a buddy, that type of thing. But I know that it's happening, but it's a very sensitive topic when we talk about military and engagement with us. Did that answer your question, sir?
So, sir, you used the term militia, correct? Do you know when the National Guard was founded?
1636.
So we predate the Constitution. It was started in Massachusetts in 1636, but the draft that asked for the militia to be formed said all men, sorry ladies, at the time it was just men, 16 to 60 were required to serve in the militia. The name militia never did come out of the title for the National Guard until 1916, when it became officially known as the National Guard. So I know that term has gotten a bit of negative press, especially recently with the rise of some extremist groups. But militia actually is very historical to those of us in the Guard, because that's where we came from. They were required to defend their territories throughout the original 13 colonies. And as an aside, Florida tries to say they had the first National Guard. They weren't part of the original 13 colonies, and they lose. It was Massachusetts. Even though I'm from the South, it was Massachusetts. But militia has a negative connotation. I can tell you about that because in Arkansas, the head of the KKK is found in Arkansas. We understand it's got a negative connotation, but historically, militia actually was a part of who we are and where we came from. You hear me? Whoa! Okay. I'm always checking with you.
A number of states have sent their National Guard to our southern border. Do you know if any have been sent to the northern border?
I am not tracking any National Guard on the northern border that I'm aware of with Canada. I'm not aware of any. I know the southern border certainly dominates the news, but I'm not aware of certainly any migration like we're seeing on the southern border on our northern border.
Not that level.
No.
They say it's a problem.
That may be true.
Can I just ask, I was the State Department's Canada Desk Director for a couple of years, and so I have some familiarity with the northern border. What do you have in mind when you ask the question?
Well, I just didn't know if there was some news commentators who saying we're focusing on the southern border, but the northern border is also a problem. So I just didn't know if it's enough of a problem that we send any National Guard up there. They're not covering the northern border.
Yeah, there are law enforcement issues, of course, and coverage of various things at ports of entry and at bridges and along the Great Lakes that the Coast Guard is present. So it isn't that there's no law enforcement or federal law enforcement presence, but it may be true that some people may find it easier to cross from the northern border than they might in the southern border in the current state. However, I think the numbers would be nowhere near comparable. It wouldn't be a significant number. But could I ask if you could go ahead and use it anyway so that our folks upstairs can hear you?
So you talked about the courts overseas, and I'm telling you, as people that have family members, and my father was retired lieutenant colonel to a cousin who has a son who's a Navy SEAL. We don't like the idea that if our men and women get in trouble anywhere around the world, that they're going to be in a courtroom that might not like America. And we, bring them to the Americas, let us judge our kids. And I'm wondering what you're seeing that we're not, because it's scary to think about what they might go through.
Sure. So, yes, you're absolutely right, Anne. We have laws here, and the criminal side of the military, and we prosecute and we have individuals in the war crimes. So, really, it's not about us. We're not the problem. There are other countries out there that do not have those laws, and that's what the ICC really is for. It's for those countries that will not prosecute their own individuals who are committing those crimes, or they don't have the capacity. So for us to do that, for us to join, it wouldn't hurt us, because we would always, as we are a nation of laws, we would investigate, and if there was a probable cause, if there's sufficient evidence, we would prosecute. So I didn't go into all the details of the ICC. Those are just broad statements. And you're absolutely right. We will always have right of first refusal. And we would say, Soldier X did this, we're going to investigate it, and if that soldier did that, and we can establish it by our heroes, right, court-martial, then we would prosecute them. So that's an argument that's often made, but in reality, once we investigate and we determine that there's no evidence there, that we're not going to go forward, we've met our obligations. So it's not really going to put our service members or any other government officials, I argue, at risk.
Just such a history of our boys and girls, and I'm going back, way back, being horribly mistreated by other countries, and we always try to do the right thing. I just don't like the idea that anyone that is near here less to be halfway across the world, like I said, they're not exactly fond of us.
Right, and
That's unfair.
sure, I completely understand that. But to just go back to your concern that they're going to just grab them and they're going to take them to the school, that's not really going to happen. I mean, we would, like I said sort of before, we would investigate, we would take the first action. Only if we wouldn't do that, and we didn't want to do anything then, that's a different situation. But we're in the United States, we investigate, we follow the law, so we shouldn't have that problem.
Lewis, you want to say anything about defense cooperation agreements or so forth?
Yes, so we also have, when service members go overseas, for the most part, they're already what we call SOFAs, which is Special Forces Agreements, right? Those are agreements between the United States government and the foreign government. And basically, for the most part, it says that if we were doing wrongdoing, we would still be prosecuted by our own courts. So that's another safety. The ICC really is just a court. It's in The Hague. It's for extremely the war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, and normally we're not engaging in those crimes. And if we are, we have our own system of laws within the military jurisdiction that we can address those.
The news has been reporting that enlistment is down. There are ROTC programs at universities and even in the high schools, which I hadn't known about. Are those programs getting enough young people in? Do you know?
I can't speak to the numbers of people they have in them, because I'm not, read on to what recruiting command has got going on in their various ROTC programs on the campuses. I know there's been a lot of talk of expanding the high school programs, the junior ROTC programs, which are not really a recruiting program, it's more of a civics program is what they'll tell you, but it kind of exposes young people to the military and gets them familiar with it, which, as you look at the current recruiting crisis that we're in, what the studies are showing is a lot of young people really just have no clue at all about what the military is like. They have no exposure. You can ask them what are the military services, they don't know. They're just really disconnected from the military in general. And some of that's because a very small portion of America serves in the military currently. So only 1% of us out here. The big force structure that was the World War II generation is just about gone. Vietnam generation is right behind it, right? So the number of people that young people are familiar with in the service now is really, really small. And so what a lot of recruiting command is trying to do now, along with they're completely revamping their whole structure and what they're doing, is they're trying to get back into the high schools, which was really interrupted during COVID, which really disconnected them even further. So they're working on getting back that connection point back with the young people, especially in the high schools, to expose them to, hey, here's an opportunity for you, this is what the military has to offer, but the job market's competitive. It is competitive. The unique things that the military used to offer, other private industry is now offering. So what we had to offer that was kind of unique to the Army, where we're like, well, we'll pay for this and we'll pay for that. But industry got smart and they're like, we'll pay for that too.
But I think what a lot of high school students benefit from the military is that you're learning that discipline. That they can serve them well, whether they stay with the military or go out and do the
You will have no disagreement from me.
Amen.
And I think this kind of ties into that same kind of recruiting question that I have. I just recently found out that the max age going to the services is 42. I think back 32 years ago when I was in it was like 29. How do you think, this is just for the board, how do you think that's going to affect the force structure and what kind of people you have if they're 42 years old coming in? I know, you're not a private.
I would argue that our health system really supports us looking at an older generation. Isn't 18-year-old the optimal, an 18 to 24-year-old the optimal person we want? A lot of folks between 25 and 35 are at their peak intellectual and health condition. I'll use myself as an example. I didn't become an officer until I was 33 years old. I'd already been in the military since I was 20 though. I didn't become an officer until I was 33 years old. And I was outrunning the kids that worked for me. I would argue that the life experience, we want intelligent individuals to join our organization. Who knows when we became an all-volunteer force? Does anyone know you live here? It's 1973. So it's within my lifetime that we became an all-volunteer force, meaning we no longer had conscription. The draft went away. Now, the draft is still on the books, but we haven't had a draft since Vietnam. We have an all-volunteer force of people who want to do what we do. And I think all of us would say that we want people in our forces that want to be here, not that are made to be here. Some of those older individuals have life experiences, have skills, and have particular mindsets that lend themselves to a more technical skill set, which is what we have. It's very complicated to do what we do now. I can look at how we've advanced just being as a combat arms guy, just since I've gotten in. I can't handle some of the weapon systems that my young soldiers handle now. I didn't grow up on video game shit. So we want individuals who are smarter, who are in good health, and who have some life experience that they can bring to our organization. Now, I would argue that some of these older individuals, especially at the age of 42, have things to bring. They're going to be a lot more mature. They're going to have a lot more life experience. They're going to be a lot calmer, so they can think through problems. So I remember if you put me behind something as an 18-year-old, I was probably not the guy you wanted behind Humvee. My peers are laughing because they know me now and are shaking their head saying yes. So I would argue that those individuals are exactly who we would want into our organization, just from the life skills that they have. Thank you.
Just for context, I can say that the maximum age to enter the U.S. Foreign Service is 58.
You guys have
Still have the same physical requirements. You have a question in the back.
I greatly respect the fact that you all committed your lives to protecting the United States. My question is kind of towards us, and what, as the citizens you're protecting, can we do to help you?
I think one of the things we need from you all, certainly your support is always welcome, but if you have those opportunities to talk to your elected officials, to remind them that, you know, they need to advocate for the funding that we require. We are an amazing force, but we are an expensive force. If we want to continue to dominate like we have as the United States military, to remain one of the superpowers on the earth, China's given us a run for our money, right? They are working hard to join us. You know, to stay ahead of that is going to take a lot of commitment, certainly from our elected leaders, and it's going to take funding. You know, and to advocate for the veterans organizations. So the VA also needs help with advocacy, because we serve a career, and many of you may have, right? And then you need care when you leave the service. And so that care is also important. And so not only to advocate for those who are serving currently, but to advocate for those who have left the service and now need that care, that, you know, they've earned that. And so advocate for that with your elected officials when you have the opportunity. Talk to your veterans organizations. You know, it's about access, it's about quality of care. Those are very important issues, certainly for the veterans population, as we will soon be here in the next few years, since we're on the tail end of our career. But that's really what we need from you all, as you engage with your elected officials, whether it's local, state, federal, you know, as you listen to what's going on in terms of funding for the military or programs for the military. All those things are very important for quality of life, for quality of, you know, service that you have. It's an expensive service, but it's worth it. It's the best army on the whole planet. I mean, it's amazing. So, you know, it's important.
And we have one more item. So Shauna hit on 2 items. The third is talk to your kids and grandkids. Those individuals who are propensive to join our organization or have particular skill sets, please come join us. We want you. I've got one of my children who I'm actually serving with right now. He's in uniform right now. So if you've got kids, grandkids, neighbors, cousins who are propensive and are in good shape, who don't have a criminal background, who want to serve something bigger than themselves and make an impact not only in their local communities but worldwide, the United States Army. Of course, I'm going to advocate for the Army, but tell them to join the military. We have something to offer.
Follow up on what you said. It triggered something in my mind that I've read a lot about for the last 10 years or so. That our Congress is great at allocating hundreds of billions of dollars to systems, but really not good at allocating money to people. How do you feel about that?
I'll try, sir, on this one. I think if you look at the military budget as a whole, people are the most expensive. And so I appreciate what you're saying, but there's There's a little triangle that we talk about when we look at defense management. Modernization, force structure, and readiness. But in that triangle, when you apply more to one side, it's going to have to take away from another side. So I appreciate what you're saying. There's a lot of, an A-10, an F-15, a Bradley tank. They're super expensive. When you equate that to the personnel administration costs, Shauna talked about medical care, the benefits that we promised through the GI Bill, all of those get wrapped into the cost of personnel. And so think about that triangle, and if you want to invest more in the people, and maybe the readiness and the force structure, you might be taking away from modernization. And that's something that we struggle with. I mean, we have several questions that we're always debating about. Which one gets the effort if you only have a finite amount of resources? And we have various opinions. You could ask all four of us. I would advocate in certain situations that we need to get ahead of our adversaries so that we don't have to go fight the war with the people. But there's other times I worry about, what if the threat comes to the United States? I'm going to need some people. So it's a hard balance, and we work for the civilian leaders, and so we don't get to set how much money. We get to advocate what the risk would be if you don't fund this. This is what we could do or not do in line with the civilian leader's strategy.
Anybody else? Yeah, the people aspect of the military is the largest expense, and it's the most expensive part, is all the people costs. I'm an administrator, and I deal with all the people stuff all day long. And so, that is the most expensive part of our military, and that is the part that Congress is always struggling to, that triangle balance is what Congress is always struggling to get the right mix. What's the right mix of modernization, readiness, and force structure? Super hard to get it. And certainly in today's day and age, while we're challenged with recruiting and our structures going down, we're going to invest in some systems. And at some point, that pendulum will swing the other way, and then we'll have to allocate some of that money back to force structure. So you'll see it shift from time to time. We'll invest more in force structure, and we'll have to modernize our equipment because it gets old. Some of the stuff we have out there is old. We've been keeping it running a long time. Not that it's not good stuff, but it's showing its age.
52.
That's it. It's got a lifespan, right? Yes, sir. It's got a lifespan. So at some point, we've got to invest in some new stuff so that we can continue to maintain that edge.
I think we have time for one last question back here.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for your service to our country. Much appreciated. My son went to Edinburgh University outside of Erie, Pennsylvania. He got a 4-year degree and an ROCT commission. And he is now a captain at JBLM, which you guys probably know is Joint Base Lewis McChord outside Seattle. And he's loving his job and plans to be there a long while. And he got a lot out of Edinburgh and the ROCT program. So we're very proud of him. And thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Can I just say, before we close up, that I think the panel members and I can stay for a little bit of time. I know the library has to close soon, but if anybody wants to come up after the program and talk, we have 2 minutes. And let me, on behalf of our panel, thank you all for coming out and giving us a chance to talk.